all these different roles that dogs have played. And yet now there's this other one. There's this amazing other role that I would argue is the most important of all, which is not just, which is enough, being our friend and companion and solace and oxytocin producer, but also as therapists, as valuable as medication, as valuable in some cases as surgery. You know, this is not just sort of squishy, vague, feel-good stuff. I'll talk a little bit briefly about some of the research that has been done that looks rigorously at, is animal-assisted therapy and animal-assisted activities, are they really valuable? And the answer in many, many cases is absolutely. So you all know that there are lots of kinds of, quote, assistance dogs, and it's getting actually wonderfully confusing in a really great way. The first assistance dogs I think most of us knew about were guide dogs for the blind, right? And then hearing dogs for people who are hearing impaired became increasingly common. They do wonderful work. There are psychiatric service dogs. There's a Psychiatric Service Dog Association. There are dogs who are with people all the time. Perhaps they're agoraphobic, or perhaps they have OCD. There's some people who have obsessive-compulsive disorder, and their dogs actually recognize when they start to get into a pattern and can actually break them out of it. So what I'm going to talk about for the rest of the day are therapy dogs, dogs who are in the office of a clinical psychologist, for example. Aubrey Fine is one of the first people who was a clinical psychologist, happened to bring his dog to work one day and discovered that he made profound breakthroughs with a client that he wasn't able to make before. So the dog just was there for a brief period of this person's time, but had a profoundly therapeutic effect. A person with some kind of emotional trauma who is shut down, not available, and is not responding, and then the dog comes in. You know, every one of us has one of those stories. We could all get ourselves just sobbing right now, right? I mean, there are a lot of those stories, and they're credible. They're not made up. They're very credible stories of people who became verbal after being nonverbal. Girls coming out of a coma. I mean, it happens. It really does happen. You've probably all seen times it was like, yeah, well, that wasn't really a particularly special day, right? I went on a visitation like that not too long ago, and it was like, yeah, she was, you know, the resident we talked to was like, yeah, yep. And I thought she was entertaining us more than we were. So there are those, but then there are also those life-changing moments where somebody comes out because of the presence of a dog, and we'll talk about why that might be in a little bit. Here's one more study, canine-assisted ambulation. This is a photograph from the Brody Project. I think this is Judy, yes? And so one of the things they do here with the animal-assisted therapy is to bring the dog into the physical therapy. The dog acts as a motivator. The dog acts as sort of social support. So here's a study that was done in which, it was not done here at the Brody Project, but the study basically looked at people who had had strokes. And they needed to be up and moving around, and they were having a lot of trouble getting people to participate. One of the biggest problems people in the healthcare field will tell you is getting compliance, patient compliance. Dog trainers understand this as well. Patient compliance of, you know, children, husbands, wives. I mean, we all know compliance is a challenge sometimes. And so what they found was that in this particular study, people needed to walk. 28% of them refused to walk. It's like, no, I'm not going to. I'm not going to get out of bed. I'm not going to walk. And they were physically perfectly capable of it. And needing to do it might have hurt them. So they had reasons not to want to walk, but they needed to walk. If you involved a dog, like there is here, only 7.2% of them refused to walk. That's a huge, huge difference. And the walking distance basically doubled. And that's huge too. That's a significant change. That's medically a very important change. So there's lots of evidence, lots and lots of evidence that in certain contexts, if done well, animal-assisted therapy can be truly part of healthcare teams. This is me, again, just me. I think minimally, these are the things your dog minimally needs to be able to do. Walk politely by your side. waiting to interact, wanting to interact, 4 on the floor, and that's not so easy for a lot of dogs. Calm within chaos or bomb-proof, and non-dog reactive, even if they're working alone. And this is something that is not intuitive also. Say you want to volunteer for a particular program, and in this program, it's just your dog and 1 child, like a reading program. I would love to be involved in the reading program. So I've talked about dogs a little bit. I need to be talking about the other end of the leash because it's not just about the dog. It's also about the handlers. Handlers need to know that, on the one hand, yes, of course, your dog is the therapist, or the dog is the one who is actually trying to create the benefit. So yes, it's about your dog, but it's really not. It's about the person. It's about the patient. It's about the child, and that needs to be the focus. That's the hero. That's the person. That's where the most attention needs to be focused. One of the things that sometimes people don't think about is sometimes emotionally this can be difficult work. So common mistakes and pitfalls, and then we're going to do a session on looking for signs of stress in dogs. One of the most common problems, I've seen it a lot, Karen's talked to me about it, is owners, and we all do this, unconsciously petting their dogs. So you're sitting there, you've presented your dog to a patient or a resident, and rather than letting the interaction between the person and the dog become really solidified, you sit beside your dog, basically calming yourself, right? Petting your dog. And most of us do it without even thinking about it. I mean, how many of you sit on the couch or lie on the floor and just sit and stroke your dog?